right. Happy New Year and welcome back to the Trusted Messenger podcast. I am your co-host, Trusted Messenger Program VP of Comms and Strategy, Chad Herman, along with, as always, your other co-host,
Dr. Tavalin, Executive Director.
Todd, this is a fantastic first episode for 2026 because we have a guest on who, as we like to say, he just gets it. And before we were going on the air, Todd and Tim were reminiscing a little bit about how long it's been that they've known each other, and it's been so long they can't quite remember how long it was they started talking. I think they might have actually met on a covered wagon trip somewhere to an AAP conference out west. But let us welcome to the Trusted Messenger podcast, Tim Jones. And for everyone watching on the video version, if you're just listening to this in your car or somewhere, I'll ask you to picture it. But those of you who are watching, I'm going to direct your attention to the shiny gold statue over his right shoulder. Pretty darn impressive. And it's also how we're going to lead off his intro, which is Tim Jones is the Emmy Award-winning founder and CEO of Health Nuts Media, a leading producer of health content that specializes in narrative storytelling and animation and as those of you who watch or listen to this show regularly know, these are three of Todd's and my favorite words: educate, engage, and empower people about their health. Tim Jones, welcome to the Trusted Messenger podcast. How are you today?
All right. Great. Thanks for having me. This is a great way to kick off the new year.
Yeah, we could not agree more. Obviously, Todd and I know a lot about your work and the work that you've done at Health Nuts Media. It's really, really cool. We'll get into some of it in even more depth throughout the episode. But let's just start off by telling folks a little bit of your origin story, how you got into this work, because I know you weren't always in healthcare communication. How did you get into the work? And then the work that you do at Health Nuts Media with your team.
Yeah, sure. So I went to college as a creative writing major. Had no idea what necessarily I would do with that. So
no one ever does.
Yeah, exactly. What are you going to do with that, right? But it was a lot of fun. So moved to Hollywood. Started working at Warner Brothers. They started up an animation division. So I went over and worked in animation and just fell in love. I loved the craft of animation. I love the storytelling. I loved everything about it. My wife worked also at Warner Brothers for the head of the studio and for a film director. So got to see that side of things. She got to meet lots of really interesting stars and worked in casting and did a lot of cool stuff. And it was fantastic, especially as a young person working in Hollywood. Around the turn of the century, I was running a digital agency. I was the COO of a digital agency, doing lots of entertainment kinds of work. So doing some TV series work, built MickeyMouse.com and WinnieThePooh.com for Disney, did some stuff with Elmo, and Sesame Workshop. Actually, got to work with ESPN, Mike and Mike in the Morning. And won an Emmy for some of the work we did on an animated series around that, and just having lots of fun. Really enjoyed it. And then one day, Starlight Children's Foundation came into our agency and they said, you know what, we're having a really hard time talking to teens about cancer and chemotherapy. And I thought, wow, yeah, I mean, that must be a really difficult thing to do. Starlight said, well, we've got lots of print material, but it's not really engaging, the teens the way we would like. Starlight thought that reality style television was popular with that demographic. And so they had shot a series following kids through their chemo journey. And I think they found that maybe that was too much reality, and seeing kids, go through that journey was not sort of, resonating. So they thought maybe animation would be a great way to get the information across, but at an emotional arm's length. And so even though I'd never really done anything like that, I was, sort of drawn to the mission of helping, and really open to it. And so we worked with Starlight. We created a series called Coping with Chemo, and it was 6 episodes following a young boy and a young girl through their journey from the day they found out until they finished their chemo journey, and all the things that were going on in their lives. And it did very well for them. We did a lot of work over many years with Starlight. And at one point they said, hey, we're having our annual banquet. It's down in Beverly Hills. Steven Spielberg's our chairman emeritus. Carrie Fisher's our national spokeswoman this year. She's going to be there. Of course. Yeah. Why wouldn't I want to go to an event like that? So I went there that night, and it was a great evening. But at one point, a young girl came up on stage and she said, you know what? When I was 12, they told me I had cancer, and I just gave up. I just thought that my life was over. I thought that I was going to die. I was really sad and really depressed. I didn't know what to do. And then somebody told me about these videos, and I went and I watched them, and I saw that I wasn't the only one who was going through this, that other kids had gone through the same journey. And it just gave me the strength and the courage to go through it. I went through my chemo. Now I'm in remission. And I just feel like those videos saved my life. And for me, it was that literal cartoon light bulb over the head moment to say, wow, I mean, I love storytelling and I love animation, but it didn't really dawn on me that it could have that kind of impact, that life-changing impact on people. And it started me on a path. I started working with some researchers in Los Angeles at Drew University and UCLA that were interested in health literacy. And I'd never even heard of health literacy at that point. Like, what does this mean? And so they were looking at underserved populations, English as second language populations, and how difficult it was to communicate health information and what the barriers were. So literacy, health literacy, cultural competency, all of these barriers, and then what techniques could be used to overcome some of these. And a lot of them came down to using animation, using storytelling, using these same kinds of techniques that we can reach people and make a meaningful impact on how they understand, educate, engage, and empower people to use the health information, make good choices for themselves. And so that sort of led me to create Health Nuts Media. So we created this company in 2010. And even though we work largely in pediatrics, as you've said, we see that these techniques aren't just for kids. They work for adults. We've done a lot of work with the VA, so we've seen it work really for everyone. And these techniques are really, really powerful. So anyway,
who doesn't like a good story, right?
Right. I think it's right. Go ahead,
Todd. I just want to point out that I'm not sure we're ever again going to have a guest who can name drop both Winnie the Pooh and Steven Spielberg in his intro. So that's
Tim just threw down and
threw down.
Right. Beat that.
The bar. The bar has now been raised, and we challenge all of our future guests to beat that. But,
I got a hug once from Mrs. Rogers, just to be clear.
Oh my gosh! Wow,
that's true.
We do. We've got photographic evidence of that too. I can produce that if anyone doubts it. Tim, I loved, and obviously pediatrics is near and dear to Todd's and my heart. But I love the point that you made about, and the work that you do, that storytelling and narrative isn't just for kids or teens as the way you got started, right? Human beings are hardwired for narrative. We never outgrow storytelling. We never outgrow not just sort of the interest, but sometimes the almost visceral need to keep listening to a story and find out what happens next. It's such a cheat code for getting information into the human brain. It's incredible stuff.
It really is. I've studied story for many years, going back to college. And if I could go back, I may want to have a minor in neuroscience as well, because I'm really interested in the why. Like, what is it about us that is so drawn to story? And so I read a lot of or listen to podcasts and read a lot in neuroscience, and why that is, the development of language and story, and how that works. All of Robert McKee's work on how story really affects us. One of the quotes I love, Jonathan Haidt's one of my favorite
Yeah, good
writers,
stuff.
and he's got a great quote. I paraphrase a lot, that says, "The human brain is a story processor, not a logic processor." And I think, especially in health communication, that's true. I think a lot of times they're like, well, just give them the facts, just give them the data and the science, and
That will convince them. That will sway them.
right. It really isn't enough, and I think storytelling is an underused communication tool, especially in healthcare, because if we can't connect with it, then, this is something I see you guys do all the time, and on LinkedIn and all your posts and all your communication, like, all the best information in the world will do absolutely no good unless people engage with it, right? And so,
Yeah.
what's wrong with a little story? What's wrong with a little entertainment, even if that's what brings them in, if that's what sparks that curiosity and said, I didn't know that. That's amazing. I want to learn more. I didn't know that this will either positively or negatively influence my life. This information that you're giving me, I think story is really an underutilized tool.
Amen. I know Todd is dying to jump in here, and so I'm gonna torture him a little bit more. But it's just one or two other things I want to say to follow up to what you just said, particularly about the Haidt quote. Yes, absolutely love that, about being story processors rather than logic or data processors. And I believe that that's never more true than when we are sick or when we are vulnerable.
Right.
No, from something as elemental as, oh, I'm sick and I'm staying home from work or school. I guess some people might want to curl up on the couch with a good spreadsheet, but most people, a book, let me watch some TV, a movie, and that's just for entertainment purposes. But I'm still open to that even when I'm vulnerable. And if there's a
Right.
way when I'm particularly vulnerable to get that information I need in the storytelling, tremendously important. The second thing I want to say too is I love the Roger Ebert quotation that movies, and I think you can clearly extend this to all storytelling, are empathy machines.
Right.
They are ways to get us to see and to feel and to connect with the human experience. And I thought of that immediately when you talked about the young girl going through chemo who said, "My God, I thought I was alone. I thought it was only me. Your stories, that changed my life, right? It saved my
Right.
life."
Right.
That's exactly what he's talking about, right? Being
Right.
able to find ourselves or find something else within us in a story is incredibly powerful. Now, finally, what else was I going to say? Oh, that's right. I was going to let Todd jump in and say
I'm
some
like a
things.
caged animal over here, like a caged animal.
We have successfully kept Todd under wraps for almost 14 minutes of
Thank you.
the
Thank you very
episode.
much. Yes, not good
All yours.
for
Go.
my blood pressure to
Right.
So, yeah, that some interesting dilemmas, right? So the show's about communication, and ultimately the end to tie a bow around how we can do better healthcare with better communication.
Right.
And one of the disconnects is healthcare providers. We are data machines, right?
Mhm.
I
Yep.
literally remember I was in medical school, and I'm remembering all the different like bacterial characteristics, which ones were coagulase positive, which one were negative. I mean, a list of 40 of them. And then you had to remember which were lactase, and like, which were gram positive, which were gram negative. It was, and now like all that minutia is, I could do a quick search, but can I communicate effectively? Like that just never seems, even in 2025, knowing everything we know, that still hasn't gotten to a place of importance. Not in healthcare education. I'm talking nurses, docs, pharmacists, name it. not in our training, our residency programs, and not in our professional path. Last week, we had a guest who we've known for a long time. He's an infectious disease specialist, okay? He's particularly a Lyme disease specialist. And Western Pennsylvania, like pretty much now close to being essentially the capital of Lyme disease. And we hear that Lyme disease is transmitted by deer ticks, and so he said he's gotten questions of, why don't we just kill all the deer, literally, right? and because it's a deer tick that transmits it, right? And he tells a story in like one line. This is one of his examples that I love. And he says, deer are like the public transportation of these ticks. Any mammal can transport them very quickly. A little story that tells you it's not just deer tick. They're named for being deer. So we think like killing all the deer won't do it. But immediately with a little story lets you know, oh, mice and, rats and anything else. It was just like this guy could talk about the bacteria and he could go diving deep into the minutia. Chad, his storytelling abilities, and it's exactly what
Absolutely.
Tim is talking about, but
Yeah.
with animation, right? And
Not to
graphics.
mention, I can imagine Tim and his team doing great things with sort of all these ticks on a little bus driving, on the back of a deer driving through the woods. But yeah, it is. And metaphor, right? A huge part of storytelling, a huge part of making the unknown or the unfamiliar familiar to us. And that's another part of it too, right, Tim?
Right. I think, and I talk about that a lot. I mean, as we get older, well, we always try to make sense of new information in the context of something we already understand. And so that's that metaphor really works because, I may not understand all about infectious disease, but when you put it in, in a framework that I can understand, if I like sports, you give me a sports analogy, if, that really brings it, down for kids, especially that don't have that life experience. Story also helps give them an example of what that can, look like, of what that can mean. And so, and what we find is, and the neuroscience backs this up, and there's lots of interesting examples of this, that if we don't understand something, we just make something up. It's just the way the brain works. And they've done all sorts of experiments to prove that this happens. And so kids in a scary healthcare situation, when no one's explaining things to them, when they don't know what's happening, their imaginations can go off and run wild and really turn a small question into fear or anxiety or trauma even. And so a lot of times these stories will help transport them into an experience that they've never had, but do it in a safe way and say, oh, okay, now I understand what this is for, maybe where I'm going. It's a great way to, but again, not just for kids, really for anyone.
I was going to say, this is insert adult in that same sentence, and they will fill that with rumor and all sorts of nastiness. Adult.
Yeah, I mean, and it is. And again, this goes back to storytelling. We want the closure, we want the conclusion, and we want a satisfying conclusion with all the gaps and the plot holes filled in. And so, to your point, and Todd could not agree with you more, even as adults, when there are gaps in what we know, that, and particularly again, when we're vulnerable, if it's us or a loved one who is sick, we're not going to abide those gaps. We're going to fill them in any way that we can. And if that narrative and that info isn't coming to us from the healthcare provider or whomever it is, we fill them in ourselves. And I promise you, in a way that is much less evidence-based and reality-focused than if we're getting it from the proper sources.
That's right.
I just want to elaborate further on the disconnect, which is the problem is that healthcare providers, as we said, are data machines. And and by our very, I would say, persona that tends to choose these fields, and the training we receive, we horribly undervalue communication. Chad and I have talked about the training that we get year upon year upon year is that communication can't be serious unless it's heavily bullet pointed and heavily text, and you read each bullet point down,
Right.
and then
Right.
I have to say, like, oh, you like TED Talk. Oh, I love TED Talks. They're great. And you learn so much. And it's like, right. And aren't they engaging? Because in the back of those lectures with the bullet points, I mean, there's so many heads bobbing. And Chad's basically, he likes to talk about his recovering academic history, but that's what we're taught. Like, that's serious. And so I must impart all the information to patients this way.
Right.
Well, and I'm sorry, and you're right, Todd, academic too, right? The first couple of years of my career, everyone looked askance at me because my students were also having fun. And I said, I'm on stage, I'm teaching them, and the first step in teaching them is having their attention and their engagement. And so if I am, God forbid you educate and entertain and engage all at the same time, that couldn't possibly work, Tim, could it?
Right. Well, one of my new favorite quotes that I'm using quite a bit comes from this company. You may have heard of them. They're called the Trusted Messenger Program, and I think it goes something like, "We're not failing in the science. We're failing at the communication of science." And I think that really encapsulates a lot of what you've just said. It's the data is there, the information is there, but if we can't communicate that, then if it's not helping people, then what do we do?
My current belief is that we're now graduating docs, PAs, MPs, midwives, pharmacists, nurses, clinical social workers at like 60 to 70% effectiveness, right? We haven't changed. Matter of fact, the sciences have gotten better. The stuff that they come out knowing how to get with a quick search or whatever, the resources, they're actually better than I was coming out. The problem is that they're coming out into a world where everything is being put into question in a very targeted fashion, and not always and sometimes in a very nefarious way, so that their ability to talk about even cooler technology and better diagnostic skills and better treatment plans than when I graduated 30-some years ago is higher. But their effectiveness has dropped because they have now been basically put out into a world where, information and trends and topics, everything is being turned upside down.
Right.
And your power of storytelling with Health Nets Media, I mean, the ability to cut through that. Can you talk about like just the infodemic, the tidal wave of I don't know who to believe or what to believe? How do you tackle that?
Right. I mean, it is very difficult. And I've actually just joined, there's a new not-for-profit startup that I've joined the board, trying to address just that. And they're really, trying to reach down to school-age kids and say, listen, don't just take my word for it, and don't just take anybody's word for it, but how do you go about fact checking information and sourcing this information? And I think that really is a vital skill for all of us, and something that should be more actively taught to kids, because I think the real danger, especially with these algorithms, is you know a lot about me, an amazing amount of information, and the algorithms really work around fear and disgust. And if you know what is going to upset me and how to push my buttons and how to push information to me and keep me in that bubble, it can be a very dangerous thing. And so I think and then more actively, like you said, all this information is there, but there's a lot of disinformation too. And being able to separate the signal from the noise and understand where this quote unquote fact is coming from. I see it in my own family. I hear, somebody said, "Oh, the moon landing was faked," or and truly saying that as if it were a fact. And at a certain point, okay, we're at a family gathering, and maybe we'll just let that go. But it really, it keeps me up at night to think that, there's so much of that information out there, and especially in healthcare and with, the vaccines and everything that we're talking about now, moving backwards. We've made a lot of progress, and it's scary to think how quickly we could let all that progress slip away.
So, and Tim, I've said this at lectures and even with guests, right? We've had thousands of hours of training on a stethoscope and an otoscope, no training on a communicoscope. But in my view of the optimized healthcare communication ecosystem, the role of a group like yours and the role of animated storytelling, in addition to, right? Like
Right.
the healthcare provider needs to be much better for that precious few minutes we have face to
Absolutely
face.
right.
But that's not scalable, right?
Right.
You can only see 20 or 30 patients per day. And then Chad, who ran communications at both our practice and then at a national level, said, but cementing that face-to-face time with SMS campaigns, with email, everything needs to be relevant and feeding back on itself.
Right.
But this
exactly.
tool of animation and storytelling, like, again, that's just an amazing, right? If a picture tells 1,000 words, I don't know how many words a 1 minute animation, but I saw your animations on asthma and on surgery and everything. It's a critical tool that we don't tap into.
Right. I agree. And I'm the same way. Like at the end of the day, it really is that person to person. I think with technology, that's the final link. You really need to sit in a room, have someone that you trust to talk to, and that's really that source of truth. But whether it's in a classroom, whether it's in the hospital, whether it's primary care, all of those other communication techniques and tools to support that information. And that's what we see a lot. Like, okay, we know, say, in a hospital, a lot of times we're just waiting and waiting and waiting for somebody to come in so I can get that 8 minutes. And we don't want to have to use that 8 minutes, that precious 8 minutes that we do have, going over some of the basics. And so the more that we can answer some questions, get kids and families up to speed, go, like, do you have any questions? Like, I don't even know what to ask. But now, like, okay, yes, I do have questions. So what about this? What about that? I think these are all supporting, tools. But likewise,
I want every healthcare provider who reaches for the doorknob and thinks, oh crap, here comes the question, to imagine how much more effective and efficient that visit could go, whether it's a primary care setting or in a hospital setting, if your patient and family have been primed with all the basics, who now can ask you relevant questions to, hey, in that one part where the little girl got and then they could go right to the heart of the matter, other than, oh my God, I'm late to get to the next patient. I mean, this was part of what Chad brought to our practice, was priming people with information, empowering them to answer their own questions or to ask better questions, because they had 3 sources they triangulated from our doctor's notes, and they saw a video, and they saw last week's podcast. They're like, hey, I have this question up here to ask, which was so much more meaningful, both to the provider and to the family.
Right. Absolutely.
This is a terrible analogy, but it sprang to mind and I'm going to use it anyway. We're all still young and vital. I can tell by our faces. Who am I kidding? But I also know that we probably all grew up at some point watching Wheel of Fortune. At a time before, for the final puzzle, they spotted everyone the R, S, T, L, N, and E because everyone guessed them anyway, right? SMS texts, emails, social media, a good website, sending that information out to patients ahead of time. It is the R, S, T, L, N, and E. It's like, all right, let's get the stuff that we know you're going to be concerned about out of the way. Get you that baseline information. And Todd, as you were saying, that was our whole vision at Kids Plus, and we've urged everybody out there to follow that lead, which is get as much information as engagingly and entertainingly as possible into the hands of your patients, your caregivers, your community, so that, to your point, Tim, when they do step into that exam room, you are maximizing the value of every second that's in there,
Right.
because you can focus it on exactly what they need to know, and you aren't having to answer questions that can be answered in plenty of other ways, and probably, quite frankly, in more engaging or time critical ways.
Right. So, I mean, it makes that patient experience better because you're using that, that time more effectively. Nurse burnout and provider burnout, like answering. Nobody wants to answer those same questions. Not that there's anything wrong with answering those questions, but to your point, like, okay, you can use this technology and these tools to take some of the burden off so that we can really have more meaningful, targeted conversations instead of just covering the basics.
At our practice, when we left, we had over 350 doctor's notes, provider notes on our website with what we knew were the 350 most commonly asked questions or concerns,
Right.
Fever, constipation, sleep, you name it, right? And several of our providers, including one of our colleagues here at TMP, would go into the exam room with the doctor's notes page, which was searchable by subject, by author, by keyword, up behind the EMR, and would often pull it up and say, hey, I'm going to give you a quick info here, but you can read a lot more here on the website.
Uh-huh.
It's incredibly empowering to the patients and families who can access that information 24/7, 365.
Right.
But it was also incredibly empowering to the HCPs as well to have that tool that they could use with their patients.
Exactly. Right. Right.
Yeah. And the other key that we like to make, Tim, is the trust, which we still see in 2025. We still see that people trust their own healthcare provider.
Right.
And we know that trust is transferable.
Right.
So if there are powerful animated stories to supplement what I'm telling you or to prep you, what an amazing way. Again, I want to be clear. What we see is, one, communication tends to be undervalued by healthcare providers because we don't receive it. We aren't taught it, which needs to change all the way back to where we're trained: medical school, pharmacy school, nursing school, whatever. It's also, I think, a little undervalued by the health systems themselves.
Right.
We oftentimes see that marketing sometimes gets conflated with communication.
Yep.
And, I want to be as clear as I can that what we bring to the table at TMP is a combination of clinical excellence, communication excellence, and business excellence. As healthcare providers that ran a practice that literally outcompeted $2 billion healthcare systems, it's the way we used communication strategically.
Right.
Holy crap, what Chad would have done if he had animations at his disposal, to throw into the tool belt. But I envision a day where absolutely, right? I mean, it's certainly cheaper and more effective than real world actors and everything, because the audience it can reach goes from childhood up all the way through, older adults.
Right.
The ability to whip something up so that you're, from a cost standpoint and a creative standpoint, you can make it. I mean, I'm not making light of it. I always like to say, it tells everybody, I said, everything Chad does, you could do with a smartphone and a teenager, and he'd always roll his eyes. I'm sure I'm making light of animation. I'm certain it's not that easy, but it's limitless as to what you can do with it.
Right. Right. It really is. And, I love animation. I love, the storytelling, and then working with some of these researchers, I've learned a lot along the way. So, one of the studies was really around bias. So we're all, we all have conscious or subconscious biases. And so we decide to believe or not believe based on so many, inputs. I don't like the cut of their hair. They're, whatever. And I could never trust somebody that wears a bow tie, or I could never, like, whatever that stuff is. People don't bring those same biases to animated characters. And sometimes the more cartoony they are, the less, bias they sort of bring to those characters. So in some ways, when you're trying to overcome bias, to say, all right,
that's fascinating.
Right. It is. It's just one of those strange things about, the human brain that, like, okay, if Homer Simpson says something, maybe I'm more likely to believe it than if a real actor says says it.
This seems like the perfect segue to show a couple of clips from the work that Health Nuts Media has done. But before we do that, your mention of Homer Simpson just triggered in me one of the things that I love to tell people, and they always think Todd's smiling because he knows what I'm going to say. People think I'm absolutely nuts, but I'm not. And I will defend this to the death, not just with my opinion, but with actual fact and analysis of communication. The single greatest COVID-19 vaccine explainer I have ever seen was done by Seth MacFarlane and Family Guy.
Right.
It's about a 4.5-minute video clip right straight out of the animation of the show, which is irreverent and not always on the fine side of good taste, right? And they lean into some of that as well. It's very much Family Guy.
Right.
But my Lord, the way it explains in clear, accessible, easy to understand information how all vaccines, but particularly the COVID vaccine, works and why it works. The first time I saw that, I was stunned. It's the single best piece of evidence-based medicine explanation to come out of the pandemic, and it's from the creators of Family Guy.
That's amazing because they're great communicators, right? Great storytellers. Yes. I thought probably I think it was this year, 2025, the South Park, the End of Obesity episode, where they sort of talk about the way our health system works. Like, oh my God, that's the best example of really how our health system works that I've ever seen. Right?
Yeah, it was wonderful.
Right. Yeah, and for those of you watching or listening, we will put links to these things in the show notes so that you can get to them and check them out. So be sure to do that. All right, Tim, we got 2 clips here. Which one do you want to go to first?
How about the 50 things?
Okay, that sounds like a plan. Let's jump to that one.
Welcome. I'm Lana, and this is Maru.
Aloha. Hey, we know this can be a scary place for some people, right?
I'm not scared.
Max. So, we wanted to explain some of the things you may see while in the hospital.
So yeah, that's just a little clip. So a lot of what we hear, from nurses, child life, is that lots of people, as you know, are intimidated or scared, by a healthcare journey. A lot of times kids coming in, whether they're the patient themselves, whether they're coming to visit a loved one, can be really intimidated by the hospital. There's all these beeping machines and strange sounds and weird stuff going on. And as we talked about before, if you don't know what those things are, you're just going to maybe make things up, and that can lead to really a lifetime of fear and trauma around healthcare. And so one of the things that we thought, and we created this little activity book that's, got comics and coloring pages and really defines and gives kids and families a vocabulary to say, here's what that thing is. Here's why we use it. Here's what we do. So on the one hand, you can say it's a positive distraction. It's almost like the restaurant has the placemat that you can color and, take your mind off of things. But, to educate, engage, and empower, kids in an entertaining way, we think that this is one of those ways that we can help build health literacy in a more engaging way. And so that's just a little clip of sort of what we try to do with our approach.
I wish as a kid I had access to something like that. All I knew is when I was getting my tonsils out, they promised me as much ice cream as I would want.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
That was about the explanation that I got going in for that surgery.
And I'm pretty sure that everyone our age learned that from the episode of the Brady Bunch too,
Yep,
and then
well,
people just kind of referred to that, which again sort of both laments and proves our point. Let's go to the second clip. Tim, you want to set that up for us?
So this is the NPO
Yes.
clip. Okay, so we worked with Boston Children's. One of the problems that they were having is I can't remember, 25,000 surgeries a year, right? And so and a certain amount of kids, no matter what they were doing, show up the morning of their surgery and that finds out they've had something to eat or drink, too soon. They have to cancel, reschedule, and do the whole thing. So it's a big inconvenience to the family who has to go home and, come back another day. It's a big cost driver for the hospital because all of those teams and all of the schedules, get thrown out. And they're like, we do a pre-surgical consult. We go over all of this. But I think they were finding that they were doing what we've talked about, lots of facts, but not a lot of context, and really not talking to the kids at all, like to the parents. Okay, make sure. But like, have you talked to the kids and told them why this is important? So in this little clip, you'll see a format that a kid can understand it, like, oh, they're not just being mean to me. They're trying to keep me safe. And it's all, it all really makes sense. And so we did this in both English and Spanish. So it was a great way to help the kids and the families in that pre-surgical consult really understand a little bit better in a story-driven way why NPO instructions are important. So,
all right, let's take a look.
So, the surgery's tomorrow?
Yeah, stupid tonsils. The worst part is I can't eat or drink before the surgery. It's so unfair.
That's what Goldilocks thought.
Don't you dare! You have surgery tomorrow, young lady.
Yeah, but
nothing. You can't have anything to eat.
I'm nervous about my surgery, and nervousness makes me hungry. I don't understand why I can't eat. It's not fair.
So anyway, that's the setup for the episode.
To be clear, we're talking about kids and explaining things to them. I have an adult friend. He's a smart dude. Had surgery on his arm. Spoke to the same office twice and doctor twice, and came back with completely conflicting information about his rehabilitation. One, allowing him to use the area of surgery within like 3 weeks versus 3 months. Like, it was completely conflicting. I'm like, dude, if you do the wrong one, like, you could destroy what they did. And he's like, yeah. I'm like, no, you got to call them. And I'm thinking, boy, wouldn't Goldilocks, if she had that same surgery, could pretty clearly, without any equivocation, say which one was the right approach to start doing your PT and start using that arm versus
Right.
like, I don't know, maybe I'll average the two. Oh my Lord. And you know,
and to the point that we were making earlier about saving time and energy and things being scalable, those are two phone call / questions that wouldn't have to happen because your friend could just watch Goldilocks explain that in fact it's 3 months, not 3 weeks, and here's what he should do. Yeah.
Right.
Amen and hallelujah.
Right. And we've seen some of that, in some of the research that we've done with our work, because a lot of times the provider will say, well, of course, everybody would rather talk to me. So like giving them a video, like they would rather, just talk to me. That would be the thing.
They'd rather get accurate, good information that was
and the research
engaging and educational
right.
and entertaining and empowering.
doesn't always bear that out. And some of those reasons you understand, like, okay, well, you don't always know when they're going to come in, and I've just had this pain medication. I'm not really thinking clearly. My wife, went out and then they come back. Like, what did they say? Like, I'm trying to remember, and I can't get it all straight. So having something like that, like, let's just watch the video again. Let's watch this.
And I'm just going to call it out. Most of those healthcare providers aren't as good at communicators as they think they are anyway. But even if you are the best communicator, Tim, to your point, you could be on medication. You could be anxious. You could have a simultaneous issue going on. I remember that great Cleveland Clinic empathy video where they don't have any words, it's just bubbles over their head.
Yeah.
And one is this woman, you just see this look of dread, and the healthcare provider's talking to her, and out of her head is, I just can't hear anything. I'm just too scared right now. None of this is helping me. And it's like, that's why we need multiple, Chad was always about, at our practice at Kids Plus, he was like, we're going to be on every platform. Like, we were on Instagram, we were on Facebook, we were on YouTube, we were on Vimeo. I don't know how our different audiences are going to take it. So we're going to be wherever they are, truly meeting people where they're at. That could also be with a podcast. It could be on a doctor's note, because we wanted people to consume information the way they wanted to consume it. If you don't provide that information, if you're not where people are at and deliver things the way they want it delivered, they will go to the platform that they like, or the way that they like things to be delivered, and they will get it. Oftentimes not from somebody that's taken an oath to do no harm or has the professional credibility to provide them the accurate information.
That's right. Yeah. One of the examples, we worked with the VA, and so this was sort of in that end of life. So talking about hospice care. And so it was the nurse's job to say, would you like a hospice consult? And they were saying, almost all the veterans were saying no, because they thought they knew what it was. And like, okay, you're just going to send me off and leave me to die. And I don't want to talk about it. She said, one vet told her, you can talk to me about hospice when you're shoveling dirt on my coffin, right? That's when you can talk to me about it. And it was such a hard thing to get over. And the vets weren't understanding, like, this really puts your family in a rough spot. It really puts, like, it's really something. So we created a video, a 3-minute video that they would say, hey, can you watch this? I'll come back in 5 minutes, and then I'll ask about the consult. And the approval went from like low single digits up to 100% after watching this video. And sort of explaining a little bit and understanding some of the drivers, because you go, I don't care about me, but I don't want to be a burden to my family. So if what I'm saying, like, you can't talk to me, puts a burden on my family, then of course you can talk to, and so some of that communication, but it was really effective to say, okay, now at least it just opens the door, right? And so a lot of times I think that's what these videos can do.
The classic version of that is, and this is from personal experience as well as friends, family, and professional end of life situations, is we waited too long to get hospice. We had no idea that it actually added to the quality and the dignity of their life. But when you think it just means, oh, this is where they don't care anymore, and you're shipping me off to, and that's, I'm sure that I never saw your video, but I can tell you from all the stories, people are like, and even the patients saying we waited too long. I didn't realize this helps me feel more like I have more dignity, more control, more of a voice, more comfort. I mean, oh my goodness.
Yeah. And one of the things I want to emphasize here, to bring it back really full circle, you were talking earlier, Tim, about the importance of good communication, showing the audience what's in it for me, about the benefits, right? This is a prime example that clearly one of the things that helped set the table in that video was showing those vets who were going to go into hospice what was in it for them, and obviously specifically for their family, which was also for them. All you need, obviously, is that engagement, but you need to find what you said, open the door, ways to open the door, ways to get that information in. And sometimes it's with individual benefits. Sometimes it's just with engagement, or it's entertainment, or it's a good laugh, or whatever it is. One of my favorite quotations, from David Byrne, lead singer and songwriter of legendary rock band The Talking Heads. He said, lyrics are a trick to get people to listen to the music longer. Um, and I've used that a lot in my teaching and in any kind of sort of communication setting of there are tricks. I don't like to call them tricks. There are tools.
Right.
There are strategies. There are techniques
Right.
that you can use to get people to listen to the music longer or to listen to it at all and actually give it a shot. And that's an astounding turnaround from almost 0 to 100%. And it wasn't a 10-page document. It wasn't a 30-minute, you said a 3-minute video to
Right.
have that
Right.
much of an impact. It's incredible.
Right. And so I think a lot of times these tools can be used to just open the door to conversations, to spark curiosity, and they're never, our job is not to be encyclopedic. It's not like, oh, after watching this video, you're going to know, like, that's
Yes.
not what
Yes.
we're about, right? Because there is a lot of information out there, but if I'm not interested in even learning more or finding out, and I think it is that's the the quote we use, like, everybody listens to the same radio station, the WIFM, what's in it for me?
That's right.
It's the most popular radio station in the world because that's what we're really concerned with, right? And so
Right.
sometimes story, one of the things, and John Green is another author I really, love. He's, great fiction writer. He's not writing fiction. He just wrote a book called Everything is Tuberculosis. And I don't think I'm interested in is that a subject but man, what a page turner, and the way he tells the story and, puts it into context. And we think about the inequity of healthcare and how it's delivered. And we have this ability to basically cure, tuberculosis. And yet, 1.25 million people every year die from something that's completely preventable, and why that is, and tells the story, not with data and facts. I mean, there's a lot of that, but really there's this kid that he meets and talks about like what happened and how he, goes through this journey and what he was all about, how this took his life. And really by the end, it's just a tearjerker. And I'm so, interested now in this subject. I thought, wow, we could use a lot more of this in health and public health, to say, I didn't think I was even interested in this topic, but someone told me this story that really, sparked that curiosity, that really helped me walk in someone else's shoes to see the world from a different point of view, that I can't go back to the way I thought before. I think it can be a really powerful tool.
Obviously, throughout this episode, I think we've given lots of good tidbits, pieces of advice, tips for healthcare providers on how to use communication and the power of communication. Let's just give them one more, Tim. If you, because you're someone who communicates and is now doing health communication for a living, something that a healthcare provider can watch or hear this podcast, and then that same day or the very next day walk into the exam room and use some sort of storytelling or narrative or communication technique. What's one good piece of advice you have for them?
Well, the other thing, and I get this from you and from everything else, I read this idea of narrative medicine. And this idea that everything in communications in both ways is a story. And so this idea that actually listening, asking a question and really listening to that answer, and not just holding your tongue. So it's my turn to speak now, but, listening to the words and how they, I feel like I'm drowning. I feel like the words that they use can really tell you a lot about how they're, thinking. So this idea of storytelling really goes both ways. And so really understanding where someone is coming from, the more you understand and listen and go, oh, I understand what this person is going through. And then maybe being able then to put something into context to say, now I understand everything they just talked about was a sports analogy, or it was something. If I can use something in that vein that would really help them contextualize this information, I think that's a really powerful tool. So
active listening is a core part of what we do at Trusted Messenger Program. So that is spot on. I know, Chad, after the last episode, you were going to provide a little oxygen to shout out to any previous mentor for our guests.
Absolutely, yeah. And last week's episode with Andy Nowalk, we were talking about. I'm a little biased on this, being the child of two teachers, a recovering academic myself, the power of a good teacher. So we're going to start asking everybody out there who comes on the show as a guest, give us a shout out to a really powerful educator or mentor, just briefly, that you had in your life or your career, Tim.
So my professor, who's no longer with us in college, Michael Mott, English. He was a poet and a great writer. My creative writing, teacher, and really. Show don't tell was one of the most important, story lessons, right? And so yes. I think everything that we've talked about sort of falls into that. I think healthcare tells and doesn't show enough. And I think that use of storytelling and communication can help us move from the telling to the showing. He also had another great saying. He's like, people like mystery, they don't like muddle. And so this idea, right, that, a mystery is well defined and well structured, and muddle is just confusion. And so I think, especially in healthcare, we work a lot in muddle, and there's nothing wrong with a little mystery. I love a good mystery, especially when it's solved at the end and all the pieces fall into place, and I go, now I get it. And the mystery keeps me, going along. Muddle just leaves us confused and wondering. So that thank you to Michael Mott for teaching me those two important life lessons.
And thank you to Michael Mott for teaching you now. To everyone who is listening to this episode, I can't think of a better place to stop than with good, practical advice from a beloved mentor or teacher. Tim Jones, thank you so very much for being our guest here on the Trusted Messenger podcast. And again, feel free to check out the work again that Tim's company does. They are Health Nuts Media. You've seen some examples on this show. They do fabulous work. And again, it's the kind of work that we are doing here at the Trusted Messenger program, which is using the humble but infinite power of communication to change people's lives, to change behavior, and to drive much, much, much better healthcare and public health outcomes. We will pick up the conversation. I'll make this joke because we had it on LinkedIn. Tim, we'll make that same bad time, same bad channel right here on the podcast next week. Thank you all for joining us.
All right. Thanks for having me.